What's up, people? Joe Winko here, your favorite Hawaiian guy, and here's my next episode of Joe Winko Talk. It is going to be a tad bit of a gloomy episode of Joe Winko Talk, and it's definitely going to be a personal one. This whole episode of Joe Winko Talk is going to be about my whole entire life, summarized, basically. um like where I came from and where I lived and everything. It's the stories of my past revealed. The story of my past revealed. That's what it is. So most of this is stuff you guys probably already know, but some of it might be stuff you guys don't know. So first things first, I was born in Wisconsin on December 5th, 1995, and the farthest back I could remember is kindergarten. I don't really remember exactly what date I was adopted on, but I do know what became of my biological parents and my twin brother. What happened was my biological mother, she was born in 1982 and she died of drug complications in December of 1995, 2 weeks after me and my twin brother were born. And because she was a frequent drug user, according to my adoptive parents and according to my uncle. My biological father was put in prison because he was crazy and he tried murdering me and he murdered my twin brother. But he died and he was killed in prison by inmates in 1998. And my twin brother was murdered by my biological father in spring of 1996. The farthest back I could remember in my life is kindergarten. And I was living with my adoptive parents at that time, the same ones I always had. I always remember being with them, but I'm not exactly sure when the exact date they adopted me was. It could have been any time from 1996 to 1999, I believe, because I don't remember anything before kindergarten at all and never really had remembered anything before kindergarten. Even back when I was a kid, I didn't. I always. The thing was, I always knew that they weren't my biological parents, and usually children who are adopted are able to tell this, that they're not with their biological parents. They're able to sense that for some reason. I always knew that they weren't mine, and another thing I kind of always knew was that I never was gonna find my biological parents because I always kind of sensed that they were dead and that they were gone, really. It is kind of depressing, but that's what I always felt, really. But I never knew what happened to them, and I never even knew that I had a twin brother until much later on. So I lived with my adoptive parents in the outskirts of Wisconsin. That's where I spent most of my life. Well, not the outskirts of Wisconsin, the outskirts of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That's the largest city in the state of Wisconsin. But I never lived in the city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I always lived in one of the villages in the outskirts of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in case you're wondering. And me and my adoptive parents were never close at all. My adoptive mother was actually abusive. She never she never slapped me hard enough to leave a bruise, but she was always really bitchy and always really controlling, and she was emotionally and physically abusive, really. Because one time back in 2007, when she left me home alone, I explained, I don't really want to talk about this, but I explained that in a whole episode of Joe Winko Talk. It's the In Memory of Kosha Rogers episode of Joe Winko Talk. I'll have that linked to that in the pinned comments. And really, like, she always would slap me around whenever I said something she didn't like at all. And people always tell me, oh, well, that's not abuse. And I said, well, what if I slapped you in the face for saying something that I didn't like at all? I'd get in trouble for that. But in the USA, parents don't get in trouble for slapping their kids around like that. So that's the country I'm living in. If you don't live in the USA, be proud. But how I found out about my biological parents and what happened to them was in 2006 and 2007. That was around the time I was 10 and 11 years old. I started having sleep paralysis episodes, really. And in early 2007, my adoptive parents had a discussion with me, and they told me that they told me everything about what happened with my biological parents, and my uncle Romario, who I was sent to live with shortly after that, confirmed all of it. But between that, I was also living in Canada from January of 2006, like late January of 2006 to May of 2006. And Canada was really nice. It was the west coast of Canada, near the Vancouver area, because my adoptive parents lived there. They would have been my grandparents. And it felt a lot like Courage the Cowardly Dog because they lived out in a house in the middle of nowhere, and that's where I lived with them. And it was just the country and these vast fields and everything. That's always how I wanted to live, really, like out in the middle of nowhere. But that never really appeals to anyone else except to me, apparently. And I only had one friend when I was in Canada. The thing was, I never really talk about this very often, but the reason why I went back to the USA is because my friend, my only friend who I had in Canada, was murdered, and I never really had the guts to discuss that. I always planned about talking about it in an episode of Joe Inco Talk, but I was only 10 years old at that time, and it was really traumatizing, and I really don't want to get into detail on that because it's extremely painful to talk about. But after that happened in May of 2006, things got really out of hand, and I couldn't live up in Canada anymore. And they sent me back to Wisconsin to live with my adoptive parents. So that's when the sleep paralysis episodes continued, when I kept having the sleep paralysis nightmares. I'll have the link to that in the pinned comments because I did a whole episode of Joe Winko talk about that a long time ago. And in 2007, that's when I found out about what happened to my biological parents, really. And I didn't know about my twin brother. His name was Crystal. That's what they said his name was. That's what my uncle told me his name was. I didn't know about him, but when I found out about that, it kind of took a toll on me afterwards, like in 2011-ish, because that's when I made my Sims 2 horror movie, Lake Pewauk 2, and it was about him, really. And what happened next was in October of 2007, I met this really fucked up person on MySpace, and it didn't really go so well. Like, I was looking for friends on MySpace, and this guy was like a psychopath, and I was injured really badly, and I didn't feel safe in Wisconsin anymore, and I really wanted to get out and leave. Like, I wouldn't even leave my bedroom at all. And what ended up happening was my adoptive parents, they sent me to the Dominican Republic to live with my biological uncle. And I absolutely loved the Dominican Republic. It was beautiful there. We lived on the eastern side of the Dominican Republic, but we didn't live in like an urban area. It was like a rural area out in the middle of nowhere. I lived there with my uncle Mario, and he had this huge house out in the Dominican Republic, and he was the only biological relative I ever knew, and me and him were like best friends. Like, I was literally with him like every single day, and it was really just me and him every single day. But that didn't last forever either, because eventually what happened was he went into a coma due to brain cancer in January of 2010. I moved in with him in December of 2007, but in January 2010 he went into brain cancer, and I had to go back to Wisconsin because I couldn't stay there by myself. And when I came back to Wisconsin, I came to live with my my adoptive parents, and that was when I was 14 in January 2010. And that's when I came back a couple months afterwards. That's when I was finally diagnosed with autism. Um, and that's a psychological condition I have that affects my mind and affects the way I think. I was eventually diagnosed with more psychological conditions years after that. But then afterward, like, quite a bit of stuff happened between then and later on. But then in 2016, in August and September 2016, things between me and my adoptive parents weren't going well. Because as I mentioned earlier, my adoptive parents really were not good people. They kind of put me through hell my whole entire life. And as I said, my adoptive mother was abusive, and to this day, she refuses to accept responsibility because of it, and it really pisses me off. And that anger still kind of festered with me, even as I grew up, and it got kind of out of hand, and that's the reason why I couldn't live with my adoptive parents anymore. The thing is, what I noticed is most like normal minded people, when they're angry about their parents abusing them, they take it out on other people. However, because of my autism, I don't take out anger on other people. I take it out on the source of where it came from. And that's the reason why me and my adoptive parents couldn't live together, because they're the ones who abused me back when I was a little kid, and I was taking it out on them. And it got really out of hand one day, and a lot of messed up stuff happened. So then that's when they put me out into my own apartment for a year when I was 20 years old in West Dallas, Wisconsin. And if you scroll through my episodes of Joe Winko Talk, you can see that they're done in a different bedroom besides the one I'm in right now. And they're done in a newer bedroom besides the one I always was doing them in at my adoptive parents' house. Um, it was in West Dallas, Wisconsin, and I've been to West Dallas many times. It wasn't like it was like super far away from where I used to live. And I just really hated Wisconsin, and I just hated everything and just wanted to get away from Wisconsin forever. So I was trying to find someone to live with in who lived down south, because I always wanted to live down south. What I was really trying to find was a lover or partner who lived down south who would have me come live with them. But obviously, that did not work out. I just kept running into a bunch of goons and a bunch of backstabbers, as I explained, like my South Carolina backstabbers. But then eventually, what happened was I just kind of gave up on everything, and I just didn't care at all. I just didn't want to die in the state of Wisconsin because I hated Wisconsin and I wanted to leave there forever. And as I explained in one of my other episodes of Joe Winko Talk, a psychic told me that I was supposed to die in a forest in North Carolina. That's a whole nother long story that would take me a while to explain, but I did a whole episode of Joe Winko Talk about it. I'll have the link to that in the pinned comments. I'm linking a lot of videos in the pinned comments. But what ended up happening was, like, basically what she said was there's this guy who I was talking to online. He knew that I didn't want to die in Wisconsin, so what he was going to do was he was going to come to Wisconsin, pick me up, and then leave me in a forest in North Carolina. I didn't tell anyone about that, but then later on, what I thought was going to happen was I was going to die of my type 1 diabetes. And I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes while I was living in the Dominican Republic when I was 12 years old in February of 2008. I forgot to mention that. But that's what I thought was going to happen, because if I would have became homeless, I would have had no way to get insulin. And plus, my adoptive parents, they were paying for my apartment while I was living in West Dallas, Wisconsin. But they said that after my apartment lease expires, that they're not going to pay for it anymore, and then I'm going to be out on my own and out on the streets. But then, they said that But then afterwards, when the guy took me to see the psychic, and the psychic told me how I was going to die out in the forest, she said that I was going to die an extremely violent death. She said I wasn't going to get murdered by anyone or anything, but she said I was going to be killed by a tornado. And she described in detail how my body was going to be ripped apart and mutilated. I never told anyone that I was planning on running off to the forest in North Carolina, but after she told me that, I couldn't really keep it to myself, and I started typing about it online. The only reason why that didn't happen was one of my adoptive parents' relatives ended up finding that, and right away they knew it was from me. And then they told my adoptive parents about it, and my adoptive parents are super religious, and they believed that if I would have been left out in the forest for dead because they allowed me to become homeless. And if I would have died out in the forest, God would have been very angry with them and he would have punished them for it and sent them to hell for it. They explained this to me many times. So that's the only reason why they sent me down south to live with their relatives, because they really didn't care about me dying in the forest at all, as they explained to me numerous times. And on October 4th of 2017, they dropped me off down south to live with their relatives. And now I live in this huge mansion down south. And the strange thing is, my adoptive parents' relatives, they're not really mean at all. I rarely ever see them at all. But they keep all the hallways and the doors locked up, and I can't get into them. I never even been through the front door of this house before. I have to go around through the back, and there's like this small hallway that I go through, and that's where they have this room. There's a corridor outside that door that leads to a bathroom with a shower, and which leads to a place where a spare stove and a spare microwave and a spare refrigerator are plugged in. And here's where I'm at now, and I definitely feel that I'm living on borrowed time, and I have no idea where I'm going to go next, because I told my life story to other people, and they said, "Oh, notice how you always keep going back to Wisconsin?" Well, I can't go back to Wisconsin now. There's nothing back there for me to go to. And I told that to one person, and he actually started laughing at me, and I was like, "What's so funny about that? There's nothing funny about that." But I can't go back to Wisconsin now because there's nothing for me to go back to. Like back then, when I came back to Wisconsin from Canada or from the Dominican Republic, my adoptive parents, they had to take me back in because I was a minor at that time. But right now, I'm 22 years old, and trust me, they definitely do not want me coming back to live with them at all. So here I am right now, and I have no idea how long I'm going to be here, honestly. But yeah, that's basically my whole life story and where I lived and where I came from. So that's basically it for this whole episode of Joe Winko Talk. I tried to keep it as short as possible, but it's kind of difficult to explain. I kind of have a difficult time explaining myself with my autism and everything because I try not to leave out any details at all. But that's basically it for this episode of Joe Winko Talk. So please tell me what you think of everything, and don't forget to like, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr. So that's it. Peace out, people.